Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the new Google TV streamer. This is Google's newest streaming box that will replace their lower-priced Chromecasts, and like the others, it is running with the Google TV/Android TV operating system. And we're going to take a closer look at what this box is all about in just a second, but I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for this with my own funds. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. No one is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this new TV box is all about. Now, the price point on this is $99. Google is definitely moving into the more premium side of the marketplace with this new streaming box. One thing to keep in mind here is that the price does not include the HDMI cable, so you do need to make sure you have an HDMI 2.1 compatible cable if you are hooking this up to a 4K television. But you do get a power adapter, a nice long USB cable here, and a remote that we'll be touching on a little bit later in the video. Now, I do want to let you know up front that this is not for enthusiasts. So if you are a home theater nerd like me and are looking for lossless audio pass-through and all the HDR modes being covered, this doesn't do it on the enthusiast side. It will work fine with all of the major streaming apps out there, but for those of you who are running Blu-ray rips through your servers, this is not going to cut it, unfortunately. So our search for the perfect enthusiast device will continue, and you're not going to see a lot of enthusiast discussion in this video because this just isn't suited for those purposes. But for consumers, it isn't bad. So why don't we get this thing booted up and take a look at what this new Google TV streamer looks like. Now, on the back of the unit here, you've got your HDMI port. They do have gigabit Ethernet on this device. We don't typically see gigabit these days on these streaming boxes. They're often just 100 megabit only, but you do have a nice fast Ethernet connection here. And if you are able to plug this in directly to your internet connection via Ethernet, I would recommend you do that because you will have much better results streaming from the wired network than you will over Wi-Fi. That said, it does have Wi-Fi 6 on board, and I found the Wi-Fi performance to be perfectly fine for streaming from all the major services, provided it has a good signal. And you have a better chance on this one given the fact that it will be sitting somewhere out from behind the television, given its industrial design here. But still, the Ethernet is the way to go, in my opinion. Over here, you've got your USB Type-C port for power. You can plug in a powered USB-C hub and pass power through and still connect data devices to it. And it does support the exFAT and FAT32 file systems on external hard drives. So you can plug in something for games or whatever if you wanted to do that. But for many folks, they'll just plug the power cable in directly, but you have the option to do a little bit more if you want to. Then you'll see this little button here. And what this button does is it will page the remote control if you happen to lose it. So when you push the button here, you'll get a little beep on the remote and an indicator on screen here to tell you that it's playing the sound. And then, of course, you can just hit the button to locate it. So nice to see a new feature added here to at least the Google line of streamers, although we did see this on the new On Pro box that came out recently from Walmart. Now, performance on this new box feels very fast and responsive. We'll load up Netflix here from scratch so you can see how quickly things come up. And I was very pleased with just how fast it feels. It's got a nice no lag kind of interface to it. It does give you more of that premium feel, perhaps. We'll load up the Creative Commons video that they have on Netflix here so we can do a quick video test so you can see it in action here. There's a video called Meridian that is allowable by copyright here. And if I go ahead here and hit the play button, it will start playing. Now, you may have seen a note on there about frame rate matching. I will talk more about that in a minute. But you can see just how quickly everything came up here. I can scroll through the video here, maybe beyond the cache that we've got, and start a new playback, and all very quick and responsive, what you would expect, I think, for the price point here. So performance is pretty decent on this box. Now, driving the performance here is the amount of memory that Google has put on board. 4 gigabytes of RAM along with 32 gigabytes of storage. It's got a MediaTek processor built in, an MT8696, which is fine for this kind of stuff, but not so great for gaming, as you'll see in our benchmarks in a little bit. So although it feels faster, it's actually running at a very similar level of performance with devices that cost half as much. And we'll dive into that when we get to the benchmarks in a little bit. Now, I found no compatibility issues with the major streaming services on this box. I tested Amazon Prime Video, Disney Plus, Netflix, and a few others. Everything worked as expected. I was able to get Dolby Vision for HDR, 4K playback, and Atmos audio, all to be recognized by my television and audio receiver, so we were all good on that front. You will see HD right here, and that's just because I've got it plugged into some capture hardware that doesn't support all the copy protection, but upstairs it was perfectly fine. And one thing that I did discover, though, is that they still haven't solved, and this is a nerdy problem, they still haven't solved the 24p playback issue. What that means is that many films and TV shows are shot at 24 frames per second, and what you want to have happen is your box switching your television into that 24p mode so it can play things back properly. In my testing, I had the same issues on this box as I did with all of the previous Android version boxes, which is that it wasn't working on most of the apps that I tried. So Netflix did it, but Disney Plus and Prime Video and Apple TV Plus were not. I was not getting that 24p switchover, so we're still not quite there on frame rate switching, which is why I am still using Apple TVs most of the time for my playback. Now, this is running with the latest version of Android, Android 14, and like prior versions of the Google TV operating system here, it is very much heavily loaded up with ads, and so you do have to put up with that. Up at the top here, you've got things very cleanly delineated between what's recommended for you. You have your live section here, which will show you all the free channels that Google is curating here, and a number of apps also kind of integrate themselves into this channel guide setup here. These are all the same types of channels you see on Pluto and some of the other streaming services out there. If we go back up to the top here, you've got your app section where you can search for apps from the Google Play Store and install them. And one thing that I like about these Google boxes versus, let's say, a Roku is that you have more than just TV watching stuff that you can do on here. They also have some games that you can install and retro game emulators and that sort of thing. So you have a little more flexibility in the types of things that you can run on a Google TV device versus something like a Roku, which is much more limited in what it can do. You also have your library section here, so if you have purchased movies either through Google or through Movies Anywhere, those will show up on here and you can watch and download those directly from that section. The recommendations here are working pretty much as they did before. However, there are still some issues with it. So for example, if I do a quick voice search here, let me hold down the microphone button for Stranger Things. What'll happen is I will get Stranger Things popping up in the universal search, but I still cannot add Netflix titles to the watch list that Google has built into the interface here. And one of the things that I love about the watch list feature is that it can kind of act as a to-do list across all of the different services that you might be subscribed to. But the biggest service here doesn't work with it for some reason and hasn't for many years. It drives me crazy, but that's still the case here. I use Plex, which in full disclosure is a sponsor here on the channel. Their watch list is truly universal, so if you were looking for something like that, the Plex app might be worth looking at. But here, at least in the basic interface, you cannot add this to your watch list, unfortunately. The recommendations are still pretty good here. Mine are getting a bit mixed up because my kids are often playing around on my Android TV devices and watching their own stuff, which is kind of messing things up. You can actually go up here and change who is logged into the device, so you can have a separate account for your kids and your spouse and everybody else in the household, so everybody gets the right recommendations. But they all have to remember to get up there and switch the user before sitting down to watch television. One thing that they've added now in the new version here is the ability to get some AI enhanced descriptions of what you're looking for. So for example, this is the landing page for Severance, which is on Apple TV. And what we have now are some things that are generated here by the Gemini AI engine that Google has. So for example, you can get a synopsis of what some of the audience reviews are without having to go jump onto a website here. So it's pretty simple stuff. It's not something you can't get anywhere else just by asking ChatGPT for it, but it's now integrated into the interface. Now, Gemini is not integrated, though, into your searches just yet, which I think would be a great value add to this device. But the searches are getting a little more useful. So for example, if I ask it, what episode of Star Trek first featured the Borg? What you'll see here is a properly transcribed question. The answer comes up and brings me over to this Wikipedia page. And I don't believe on prior versions of Android you could actually browse a link like this. but here it actually brings me to the Wikipedia page where I suppose I could get my answer. So unfortunately, it's not bringing me to the episode just yet, but we all know that these AI models could do that for us if it was better integrated. But there are some improvements overall here to the interface. One last thing is that if your apps are getting a bit hard to manage or just out of the order that you would like them in, what you can do here is click on the reorder button and pick one and move it up the line here if you want to get things into a better spot. But still, the interface is really going to try to gear you towards recommendations and things that drive subscription dollars and advertising. Now, prior versions of Android and Google TV allowed you to control devices around your home with your voice. Now you can control them with the remote control. If I hold down the home button here, what I'll get is the option to go over here to Google Home. And in that menu, I've got access to my cameras, to some lighting, and to some climate devices. I found that your lights and cameras, at least the ones that are online and assigned to a room in your home, will appear on this list. But if there are other devices that are not appearing, you have to add them to your favorites inside of the Google Home app. Now, if I go over here to lighting, for example, I could turn my studio light here off or back on again. This is a Wise light that I have linked up with my Google account. Additionally, they have some ability to control dimmers here as well. So as you can see here, my gaming room is currently set to on. I can turn that off, or I can turn it back on here. And then if I hit left and right on the controller, I can change the dim level of that bulb in that room. So you do have some ability now to control things with your controller without having to use your voice. Now, one hardware feature that's been added to this new streaming box is that it can work as a home hub. It supports the Matter standard, and this is going to show up on your network as a thread border router. What that means for most consumers is that if you're out shopping for home devices like this little switch, and you see this Matter logo on there, that should work with this device. Unfortunately, though, all the Matter devices that I have tried to get working in this house, both with this device and my Apple TV, never work, including this button here. So it still needs a little bit more time in the oven, I think, to get working. But as we start seeing more and more of these Matter-compatible devices coming out on the market, this will support it. And this standard is supported by Google and by Apple. So you will, I think, start to see a little more of a universal standard here emerging thanks to this Matter standard, and I think that will make this device all that much more useful in the near future. On the remote here, you do have an extra button that is on the bottom, this little button with the star. What I've got mine set up to do right now is if I hit that button, it will bring me over to the home menu, so I don't have to hold down the home button. But you can go into the settings and customize that button, so let's have a look at that. So in the settings, if you go over to remotes and accessories and then go over to set up remote buttons, you will see an option here for the customizable button. And if you click on that, you have access to what this button does. So as you saw a second ago, we were using Google Home in our example, but I could change this to have it launch a favorite app. So for example, I could have it load up Disney Plus every time I push the button, and click Create Shortcut here, and now it is set for that. You can also have this change the input on your television if you want, because there is an IR blaster here on the front of the remote control that can control volume and device input if you configure it to do that. Additionally, this supports HDMI CEC. So for example, when I have this running through my home theater receiver, I can use its remote to control this and all the other stuff that's plugged into it. Now, you've always had the ability to change up the screensaver on your Google TV device. I've got it connected right now to my Google Photos library. But if I scroll down, I can change it to something else, like the art gallery where Google delivers the images to you. But they've now added a custom AI art feature here. And earlier I had it generate an image of a Siberian husky on the bridge of a starship, which it did quite nicely here. I can also create a new one with anything that I want. So I could click on Describe My Idea. I'm going to hold down the microphone button. Siberian husky playing video games. And let's see what it can do with that. It won't let you generate anything that some may consider to be offensive, so it will be limited to some degree, but a wholesome request like the one I just made should generate fairly well here. And here we've got the dog playing a video game. I can generate again, I can save it, and then you can add it to your list of images that you have generated for your screensaver, and it will shuffle through those. So let's see how it does on the second batch here. It doesn't look like the dog is playing video games, but it does look like my dog. So I'll hit done here, and it'll add that image to the mix. And what'll happen right now is it'll cycle through all of these custom AI pieces of artwork that it generated. So neat little feature, not something that's groundbreaking or reason to buy this, but it's in there if you wanted to play around with it. Now, despite its premium price, this is not a gaming powerhouse. As you'll see here, we're just playing a little game of Crossy Road, and it's not all that great from a gaming perspective. The game runs okay, but I've been noticing some lag even in a game like this one, which is not all that demanding. You still, of course, can connect up your game controllers, like I've got this 8-bit controller connected and working just fine. But overall, I was very disappointed with its gaming performance, even for simple games like this one that you'll find on the App Store. On the 3D Mark Wildlife Benchmark test, we got a score of 205, which puts it right within the margin of error with what we saw out of the Walmart On 4K Pro box that is about half the price. And as you can also see here, the king of the Android boxes, the NVIDIA Shield TV, which came out almost 10 years ago, is much higher performing for gaming. But game streaming feels okay on this. This is No Man's Sky streaming from the NVIDIA GeForce Now service. And because we've got the Ethernet hooked up here, it is playing pretty much perfectly. One thing that I did notice on this, though, and this is something that I sometimes experience with other Android devices, is that there is a bit of input lag that's noticeable with the controller connected up via Bluetooth. So this is an area where you might want to get one of those USB hubs and plug your controller in directly. But as you can see here, this game, which is running on a server quite far away from my house here, streaming to this device is working just fine. So this is an option for game streaming, which you can do through a service like GeForce Now here, or in your home with something like Steam Link. So overall, I would be much more enthusiastic about this box if it cost less or performed better for the price point here. Right now, you can get an Amazon Fire Stick or one of the On boxes and get similar performance and similar features for a lot less money. The only compelling reason to spend more on this box perhaps is the fact that it does have that Matter hub built in, but I don't think that's all that important for most consumers these days. So really, at this point, I think you'd be spending a little bit too much if you bought this one over a less expensive alternative. That's going to do it for this one. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.